You're welcome, guys. Thank you for being here again with our bi-weekly webinar behind the scenes. And before we start, I would like to invite you again. Let me get the link. Sorry for not preparing the link. Remember that we have this webinar every 2 weeks. And the registration for the next one on October 7 is already open. And you can find the link in the support center. Let me paste it for you there. Yep. This one. So here's the link. This is the link for following up with the webinars. Don't forget to watch, subscribe to that topic in our support center so you get notifications. We have added, we have opened the registration for the next webinar. If you are watching this topic, you should receive a notification, an email about that. And the next one will be about Aurelius dictionaries, the new upcoming feature Aurelius dictionary. Okay, so the topic for today is installers, how we are at our side build the installers for TMS business, which is a complicated topic for us, and we know it's not ideal yet, our installers, but let's learn a little bit about it. So before we start, I like to know from you, for example, when you talk about installing components in Delphi, it's a complicated procedure to do so. So that's why we have people trying to do some package managers for Delphi, including Embarcadero themselves. So a small poll here for you. Which package manager have you used in production? You might have tried some of this for just to learn about it, to try to see, but have you ever used any, it's a multiple choice, have you ever used any of these package managers to install components in your production environment, in the IDE that you develop with, or even used it for updating packages? I wonder, I believe it's not very popular, but I wonder if some of you have used it. Let's see how it goes. Get it? Let me share with you. I hope you can see the numbers. Interesting to note that DPM is being used by some of you. Interesting. That's the package manager that I think has a future technically. The problem is that if we could have a high adoption rate for it. So let me share my screen with you. As usual, don't forget to shoot any questions you might have there. You can talk between you, of course, in the chat. And if you have questions for me, I will try from time to time to read the chat and answer you the questions, all right? That's why we are live here. So this is the tool that we use here to deploy. Let me compile so you can see it. Deploy and build our installers for TMS business products, okay? This is, I hope it's clear for you there to see. This is a tool that we built in-house. So for example, here you have the list of some TMS business products here, Aurelius, different bundles, free trial version, register version, and then we have it all built by us. Here we can choose the sorry, we can choose the steps we are going to do, if it's a full deploy or for internal testing for us, and also the Delphi versions that we have to deploy to, from Delphi 7 to Delphi 11, and the platforms that we want to deploy. Okay, and this is an internal tool. Of course, I'm not going to explain everything here, but we have used popular tools before. We have used one very famous deployment tool, build tool, but which I don't want to name because the tool is actually very great, actually. But the problem is we also consider using Jenkins or things like that. The problem is that we found out that we were fighting with the tool to make the tool do the things that we needed. The tool is okay, the tools are okay, but in the end, since we have a very specific need, and we realized that at some point we were spending time trying to make the tool do what we wanted it to do, which is possible, but if we build an in-house tool, we will have more flexibility, and as strange as it sounds, we will save time because we will be more productive. So that's some of you might think strange, why you are not using some tools for that, open source, free, let other people work, especially since you are a component developer. You want people to use third-party tools, and we are not using third-party here yet. Not yet. We're not using third-party here. We ditched the third-party, actually. We might reconsider it, but it's working great for us, okay? And the deploy works like that. We have to, you see how complicated it is to, at least I consider it complicated for us to deploy a component for Delphi, because it looks simple, but it actually time consuming, and you have lots of steps here. We have to, the main problem, one of the main problems is the number of platforms and the Delphi versions that we have to support. So that multiplies the effort and the time it takes, because we have to update all packages. The source code will automate a lot part of the source code generation, especially the parts that depend on Delphi versions. So we deploy 1 to 10, I believe we have like 20 Delphi versions supported. I believe that's the number. And we have to create and update the package files, for example, for all those versions. So we do update the packages. We do compile our code, test and compile our code for all the Delphi versions and platforms. So not only to test, but also to generate the binaries. And then we have to recreate the documentation, generate trial installers for every version. So if you go to the TMS software website, you see that we have a trial version for Delphi 11, Delphi Rio, Delphi Sydney. So we have to compile and build installers and things like that. Okay. So here's what, actually, let me try to run it here. Probably it will not work because this is my development machine, and we run this in our build machine. Yeah, it's already, never mind. There's something here that are not set up. We signed the installers here, so you have to have the certificate properly installed, etc. Okay. And regarding installing the component in Delphi ID, I rather use this webinar. Actually, maybe we can talk about how to properly install a component or a package in Delphi. That's why, for example, I asked about the package managers you use, because it's a complex process, in my opinion. The thing is, for example, let me open I always have this problem here. Here, for example, I have a project with all the TMS packages, all right? So let's, for example, take this unit here, whatever, bcl.json, okay, in the BCL. So our package has lots of units. My Delphi ID frozen now. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's back. And we want those units that are in our packages that they are available for you at your side, okay? So what most people do, you might have done this with your own code. We have the bcl.json here, okay? So if I do some use in my code, bcl.json, I want Delphi to find that unit for me. Otherwise, you have file not found, units not found, error, okay? And what's the first thing that we are tempted to do is to get the directory where the unit is located and add that directory to our Delphi library path. Language, Delphi library, and we add it here. Okay, bcl.json is in my directory here. So if I add that that folder to our library path, Delphi will find the unit and all other units that are in the folder, and I can compile my application. Our installer could done that, but that's not ideal because every time you compile your application, you'll be compiling TMS business files as well. So bcl.json file will be compiled for every application you have. And worse, Delphi will generate a DCU, you see here, all over the place for that compilation. So for example, I have here Z test folder where I have a project there that compiles the bcl.json, and Delphi generated a bcl.json DCU in my output folder for that project. So you can see the mess that happens. I have lots of bcl.json.dcu all over the place in my computer. Why is that? Well, this is my development computer, and I do have the folder where the path files are located in my library path, because I also developed with TMS Business, so I want the source code to be here, but that's not ideal if you use the TMS Business as a third-party library in your application. You don't want to modify the source code. You don't want to keep compiling the source code. And another problem is that when you build your application, you have all the units compiled, so that will slow down the build of your applications. And also, because of the size of the source code, it will add up to the size of your source code, of your application source code. You have a higher chance of having compiler internal errors and out of memory errors and things like that. So ideally, what you should do, what any installer should do, is to add to the library path, to Delphi library path, you should add the folder where the DCU location, where DCU files are located. That's what Delphi do. You don't have, for example, here in the library path, you don't have the folder here you see the C program files, Embarcadero, Studio, etc. You don't have the folder here where the source code is located. You have the folder where the DCU are located. Okay? But then there comes a problem. If you use multiple platforms, you have to, the DCU is compiled to a specific platform. So here I'm talking about the Win32-bit platform. So I have to put here the folder where the DCU for compiled for Win32 must be located. That's why, again, Delphi puts here my Delphi installation folder /lib/win32 release. If I go to Win64-bit, for example, then I have a different folder here. In this case, Delphi has a macro here, but this points to the folder where the Win64-bit DCUs are located. So that as a manual process, this is a nightmare because you have to compile all the packages. So for example, this TMS-BCL DPK package file should be compiled for Win32, Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, for 32 and 64 if applied for the device or simulator. So you have to compile and generate the DCUs for all the platforms, and then you properly add the library path for each of those platforms. That's what our installer does. And also, there are different configurations. You have debug and you have release configuration. So if I am modifying your computer and adding, again, adding the folder here where the DCUs are located, I should not add DCUs with debug information there, because you are going to use those DCUs to compile your application that you are going to use in production. You don't want to have debug information even for your own code, but even less for a third-party application from a third-party provider, to have debug information inside your application. And this will also increase the size of your executable. So we have to add the library path, the folder for the DCUs files for that platform that were compiled with release config. But then you might want to debug our source code, the third-party application. Why not? Then we have this different setting here in Delphi, which is debug DCU path. Here, we should add the folder for the DCUs that were compiled with debug information. This way, when you compile your application, your application in release mode, it will use the DCUs compiled with release config. If you switch your application config to debug, then Delphi will also use the DCUs located here. So it will use our debug DCU, so you'll be able to compile. So with this setup here, you are able to use our third-party files without having to recompile them all the time, with the proper platform and in release or debug mode. Okay, and this is actually I believe this is a best practice for third-party or for your own code. Best practice how to add third-party code to your application. And by third-party, I mean even your own code. If you separate your application in models and packages, this is a good practice for you to do so, because it organizes your code, and again, you don't recompile the same code all the time, etc. I'm not sure if some of you knew about this approach, and if this is what you do instead of adding the source code to the library path. Okay. And then we have extra complication that maybe there will be no time to enter here. But for example, we're talking about packages, you have to properly set the DCP directory, because when you compile a package that require another package, you not only need the DCU, but you also need the DCP, and also generation of BPL. Okay. Actually, if you see here that BCL Aurelius. Oh no, yeah. You see here that for TMS business packages, we change the output directory, some output directory from the default Delphi. If you create a new package in Delphi, for example, you see that the unit output directory will be this one. So each DCU will end up in a folder for a specific platform, Win32, etc., and config, debugger, release. But the DCP is output to the Delphi DCP output folder, and we don't do that. We also output the platform, the DCP, for the same directory of the DCUs. And the same for BPL, we have a specific output directory for the BPL. Why is that? Because we don't want to clutter your existing folders with our stuff. So for example, the default, as I said, the default, let me create a new package here. When you create a new package, the default output folder for the DCP and the package output directory, these two here, is the DCP and BPL output folder, default output folder of Delphi, which is, I believe I showed it here. Is this one. It's the BDS commandeer / BPL / DCP, which is the documents here, I believe. Yeah, user public documents, Embarcadero, Studio, and 21 or 22, depending on your Delphi versions. So if you do that, we will be, I believe it's unsafe for us to put our stuff, TMS business stuff, in those common and centralized directories. Because uninstalling will be harder. We got lots of, in the past when we did that, we got lots of support questions that messing up user environment, different BPL versions, BPL hell, which is a kind of DLL hell. So that's why we decided to output our packages the DCP and the BPL in specific folders. That adds an extra layer of complexity because the BPL, which is a kind of DLL, has to be found system-wide, or at least by the time you open the IDE, because the IDE has to load the BPLs to install the component and have your BPL information at design time for you. And that's why the default of Delphi is to output the BPL files to that common folder, because that common folder is added to Windows system path. Delphi, when you install the Delphi, the Delphi installer it adds that directory to the system path. So that user's public documents in Barcadero Studio 22 BPL is there. So any BPL you put there is already accessible by the ID. So since we do not output our BPLs there, if the BPL is not there when you open the Delphi IDE, you see an error like the BPL could not be loaded because Delphi could not be found. It cannot guess that the BPL is inside our internal directory. So to solve that, we create symbolic links in that BPL directory of Delphi pointing to the BPLs we have in our folder. Another option will be add our own BPL folder to the system path, but that's not a good idea because the system path has a limit in the characters. So you see mine is already big here. So it will end up messing with your system, and that's not a good idea as well. Okay, so that's the complexities we have when installing. We can see some source code maybe if you're interested. There is a question here from Hick. Why wouldn't debug DCU use the debug macro like platform? It does, actually, if I understand your question. It does. It's this one here. It's the platform/config. So if you compile your code with debug, it will end up in the folder win32/debug. If you compile with release, it will end up in the win32 release. So the output is automatic, but the problem is how do we know? Okay, I guess you know what I mean. What do you mean? You mean here in library path? Because you have to ask Delphi team, because you see that in this part here, I don't even have the platform macro. You see? I cannot add a one folder for all platforms. I have to specifically, this is my library path for Win32 platform, and I have another one totally different from Win62 platform, and another for Android. So neither the config nor the platform are available through macros here. There is a specific library path for each platform. Okay. Have I answered your question? It's because there is no macro actually here for the library path. Okay, let's browse some source code here. Let me close Delphi and open again. No questions, no comments, no criticism. We are live Thursday night from Brazil to the world. You know what? One nice DPM is awesome. One nice thing about DPM is that it saves, for those in the replay, there is a comment about the Delphi package manager from Vincent Parrott, is that it saves package information per project. So if, for example, I create a new project here and I want package A and B, it installs. And if I switch to project 2, I can choose different packages, even different versions. And it saves per project. So if I switch a project, it knows, it already updates, it knows the packages and points to the correct folders for, depending on my project, even for design time. It's the correct approach, I think. One problem with Delphi is that many configurations are global. So if, for example, if I install TMS Business here, you cannot have TMS Business version 5 and version 4 in the same Delphi ID. It's only one. So with DPM approach, it tries to make it per project. And of course, the version management, dependency management, and things like that. But the problem is with all those package managers is that they have to have adoption. For example, TMS Business installers don't support any of existing package managers, even get it, because they are not widely adopted and they don't have all the features we need. So if you can try DPM, but for example, you'll not be able to install TMS Business with it. So you end up using you not have the full benefit of it because not all packages are available there. But if DPM catches up, I'm sure I would like to add support for TMS Business. Actually, we will love here to not have to build installers like this. It's a nightmare. You see the source code, you see the complexity of it. We have our installers have to do all that stuff. It's a nightmare. For example, let me open the source code here. We have layers here. We have the deployer part, the part that the code runs only on our side, on server side, to build installers. And we have code here that runs at your side, which is that package rebuild tool, this one here. I believe you remember that, TMS installer. This one, I believe all of you, if you are a TMS Business user, you know that this form here, which is the one we presented Delphi versions that you want to install for and the platforms that you want to install for. And this is the code that runs at your side. And it uses lots of units you have here that we will even not mind to share that for the package managers that could also use. Let me try to find some code here. It's like, actually we separated here with the intention of creating a package manager of our own. It is a package manager, actually. We do have a package manager here, but not complete, only for our own use, and that does not retrieves the files from some server. But we have dependency check here. We have lots of things that we've done. For example, the get installer, there are some key units here which are interesting. The get installer, I believe the get libraries, ID types, Delphi you choose, file you choose, the uninstaller. Let's open some of them here. For example, the get libraries. This is where we create our packages here. As I said, this is for our own use yet. So the packages are created from code, but we could import it from some JSON. So if you go here to create Aurelius lib, here's the source code. Can you read it well? Let me increase the font size. Oh my God. Is there a better shortcut for increasing font size in Delphi 4, 10.4? User interface, editor, display. Yeah. So here is where we create the Aurelius package for our package manager from code, but this could be in a JSON, for example. So you have an ID, we have the display name, version, the registry key where we save information, the supported Delphi versions, for example. For Aurelius, we support all Delphi versions except Delphi 7, 2007. App method, remember that? This one is app method. Delphi 2009 and 10 and the Delphi XC. So it supports XC2 and up. And then for each Delphi version, we specify which platforms that this library supports. So even though we are compiling for Delphi Rio, maybe this project supports only Win32, Windows, for example. In the case of Aurelius, it supports all platforms. So we have lots of information here that is specific to the package. Browsing path, the information, where is the source code located, because each package might be, the source code cannot follow a convention. So you have all the information here, the packages that will be compiled and things like that. So internally, this is a package manager. When you run this thing here, when you install, you are running our package manager. The packet actually our source code, the package manager, the source code of our package manager, please take it with a grain of salt, is much more complex and much more flexible than the interface you see. The user interface here is simple because we couldn't improve it much for some reasons, but the underlying source code is already very flexible. You remember when you install TMS Business, you run the inno setup, a regular Windows installer, okay? And then these windows appear here. So the installer actually only puts files in some folders and set up a registry key that says to our package manager that one package is available. All the work is done by this tool here. That's why we also recommend you, when you ask for recompilation or build or change source code, that you just have to go to the package rebuild tool, because that's where the most of job is done. So here is where we create our libraries, and then we have the installer that install a library, which is this class here, library installer. And we have check dependencies. For example, you can see here in the libraries, I don't know where is dependency. Okay, Aurelius lib here. Yeah, here Aurelius depends on TMS BCL. So here we add our dependencies, our sites, and then the installer checks for those dependencies and check for versions. As I said, we are not using this version check, for example, because when we install TMS Business, you always install the correct versions. So you install the BCL, and then when you install the Aurelius, you already have the correct BCL version needed for that version of Aurelius. And we try to not mix it up to avoid even more confusion, but the source code is prepared for dependency checking. And then you have the install process itself, which does all those steps that I mentioned. So for example, I don't remember this code. I wrote part of it. Specific TMS web installation. Where is it? Platform installer. All right. Actually, the installer, each platform is treated separately. So this is platform installer is the one that's more important. Install platform. All right. So first it's uninstall existing ones, and then check if it's C++ builder, check if that platform is supported, check if that platform is properly configured in your Delphi IDE, and then it starts to build. And since we are going to use the DCUs, we have to generate those DCUs in your site. So because we cannot provide the DCUs in advance. And then it compiles. First step is to compile all the packages to generate the DCU files at your site. And we do that for both debug and release mode. That doubles the time for the compilation. And then we grab the DCU outputs and add to the book. Then we add the library path, the debug paths, compile the Delphi versions here, library path. We create the symbolic links. This is the process that we explained to you. Okay, so this is what our installer does. And we have lots of, here we have the Delphi versions, have some Delphi utils. For example, we have to grab Delphi information, so you have to grab the where the directory or where Delphi is installed, the directory of where DCU, the files for Delphi itself, it's located, because you have to compile on the fly, and platform IDs. We have lots of. This is a unit full of utils to grab and modify Delphi installation information. So we have to check if the folder is already in the library path. We have to check the BPL output folder, add folders to the library path. So this is the unit that has such information. As I said, it's a common code for every Delphi package manager. And it's a shame that we have to write our own here, and all of those package manager authors have to do that as well. We have lots of duplicated code, but that's it. Some questions from you guys. Peterson is saying, this is very good information. I've struggled with understanding the various path definitions since day one with Delphi. Yeah. I thought about explaining this instead of just talking about what we do, because I thought it's not many people know about it or even agree with. Actually, for you to have an idea, we had several internal discussions, technical discussions at TMS here, and it was sometimes hard to agree with the best approach to install a component in Delphi. It's not, this is what I said here is not 100% correct or acceptable for many people. There are slight difference from, for example, this approach of adding a symbolic link it's not common at all. So there are different, small different approaches. The general idea is the same, but it's not the same way for every package manager or everyone that installs Delphi components. Rick is asking, does DPM require a component vendor like TMS to put it there, or can I, as a developer? No, you can do it. It's a package manager. You have the source code. You can install your package manager there in your IDE, and you can create your own packages and use it for yourself. Yes, you can. You can do it now, and it looks like it's already very useful. So it already has a use. But it would be nice that third-party packages, it would be nice that all packages could be done with it, because Imagine if it's like with Visual Studio, you go there, new application, and install. Actually, you open an application, and you say install packages needed to run this application. So I could put a project on GitHub that requires Spring for Delphi and TMS Business and whatever other third-party tool, and you open that project in your Delphi IDE and you say install dependencies, and it installs everything it needs for you, regardless if it's open source or third-party or a trial, whatever. And that will be per project. That's the key point. So it doesn't mess with the libraries that you use with your other projects. So I'm running a test project here that requires Spring for Delphi, for example. But you have another project that uses Spring for Delphi for production, and you maybe use a version from 2 months ago because, I don't know, you haven't, you want to be sure. So a per project package manager won't mess with your setup for each project. Ghazali, hi Ghazali, is asking, in the update process of update package, the first step is uninstall old package. I noticed that all TMS packages clean remove packages directory, but TMS business needs to remove manually. Which directory you mean? When we uninstall, you mean the whole TMS business, or some specific directory you are referring to? Robert Evans, font size, little slider. Okay. Okay. I knew about it. I always forget. 20 years of Delphi, so I still using some old tricks. Thank you again. Gregor, can you explain how do you make BPL files accessible for the IDE when the file are not in the standard directory? Yeah, I said it, but maybe it was overlooked. We create symbolic links. Here. And actually, it's only supported after Vista, you see? For Windows XP, that none of you are using anymore, of course. It's a different approach. So we create a Windows system, operation system symbolic link there. We put a file there, a BPL file there, but it's only a symbolic link to the BPL in our folder. Okay. That's why you have to get the Delphi BPL output folder. We have to know where the Delphi puts that BPL. And this is not easy information to get. We have to build a specific Delphi project just to get the BPL output folder. If you go into the details of it, you don't want to mess with it. Really, it's a nightmare. Gregor, why detect some... sorry, I didn't understand your question, Gregor. Why detect some installers, Delphi 7, and some not? I'm sure that Delphi 7 never okay. I believe I understand what you mean. We check for every Delphi installation. Well, when Delphi installs itself, there are traces of Delphi all over the place. How we could know that one Delphi version is installed? We could check. We could use different approaches for that. One is to check for the folder, but maybe you can install in a different folder. But I think the safest bet is to check for the registry, because when Delphi installs itself, it installs in the folder in registry key Embarcadero, software Embarcadero BDS. And it always set this root dir where we know where it's installed. So we check for this. We check for register keys. So maybe you have some leftover register keys in your computer. Okay, guys. Any more questions? Let me see if there is some question here. Any more questions about this topic? Again, let me open here. Oh, never mind. In 2 weeks, October 7, we'll talk about the upcoming feature, TMS Aurelius Dictionary. One question here, for example, installing update for Aurelius product, launch uninstaller first. Sorry, guys, my dogs are crazy here. Launch uninstaller first, who remove product, but not all files are removed. Okay, I understand. Yeah, there's something we can prove. When you uninstall something, it's complicated because you always have to be very careful for not deleting files that the user has, right? So we have to delete our files and make sure we do not delete your files. And what is your files? For example, a compilation that we did on the fly and generate DCU files in your computer at the time of your installation, it's file that we should delete or not. It's complicated. We can discuss this via email to see the details and what's left in your folder when you uninstall, and then we can analyze how and if those files should be removed. Okay? Can you please send an email with more information about that? Rick is asking, is it possible that Embarcadero is trying to get it to achieve all of this? I love to, but first it looks like it's not per project, I believe, get it. I never use it, get it, for example, unless to install, to test things. And I believe they're a little bit far from being a full package manager that you just install. DPM is great, but for example, Embarcadero already has get it. So people, as you see from our poll, most people try to use get it because it's there. So I don't know an easy solution for that. My hope is that Embarcadero improves it very fast, but and to the right direction, but I'm not sure if that's gonna happen. Is it possible to do an installer? Is this all these components in one click after the question? We would love to do that. You see, I hope it's not your business, it's our work, but I hope you have some empathy with us, that you see how complex this thing is. So we love to improve the install experience, and but it's not easy. We would love to have one-click install, and we intend to do that. You can be sure of that, but it's complicated. We want to be there, but I don't know. We want to have one-click install in summary, but I don't know when we're going to accomplish it. Is it possible? One good question. Is it possible to pre-compile package-related DCUs for major Delphi versions that compiling on-site will not be necessary? Good question. We have considered that, but first, on-site compilation is always needed because you have the source code. You should be able to recompile at your side. Maybe you want to install a patch. Maybe you want to modify the source code yourself. So we have to have a way for you to recompile and do all this process we show it in an easy way. So what we consider is providing the binaries so that you don't have to take the time to install the first time. But first, the size of the executables will be huge because, as I said, we have to provide DPLs DCUs for all the platforms. So, and I think that in the end, I'm not sure if it will be successful for many circumstances. What I mean is that I think the chance of you getting the DCU was compiled with a different version of blah 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 will be very common. So because you guys have, of course, you guys have, of course, many different setups. Maybe you have a different updates, patches installed in your Delphi. I don't know. We have to test, and we only know about that if you do. But I'm afraid that we'll do all the effort of providing the binaries, and in the end, you end up, many cases, you end up having to recompile it anyway. So, but it's something that we consider it, and we are still considering it to reduce the installation time. But another idea is just to improve the package manager, our user interface, for example, that you can choose the platforms that you want to install in a more granular way. So you install BCL for all platforms and maybe Xdata only for X2 for Windows, and then you install later for Android. So we have to improve the installation process. Okay. Okay, guys, register for the next webinar. Don't forget, so you already covered it. And there is I would like to send you another poll for you to rate the content. Please let me know if this content was interesting for you. A low rate means that we have to think about more topics. So if that's installation stuff, it's for you. And the presentation, this is anonymous. You are not rating myself. But how do you rate the pace, my English, if it's clear for you, if it was okay. All right. I'll close the poll soon, and thank you guys for coming. Thanks.